Hi everyone, Small here. We are back with more Endfield content, and today I'm breaking down the biggest changes in the second closed beta compared to the first one. I'm not going to dive deep into how every single system works, we are sticking to what's new this time around. If anything sounds confusing or you feel like you're missing context, I'd strongly suggest checking out my CBT1 video, where I go over everything from square one. Quick disclaimer, I'm a long-time Arknights player, over 6 years at this point. Action games and factory automation though aren't exactly my bread and butter. So, CBT2. From where I'm standing, the game has improved in almost every department. Combat has more depth, some characters that were honestly pretty underwhelming before got completely reworked, and we've got a bunch of brand new faces as well. The factory side of the game is way more approachable now thanks to the blueprint system, and that absolutely miserable weekly roguelike mode is gone, thankfully. Even the story, which I was very harsh on during CBT1, finally starts to show some life in the second region. Characters are better fleshed out, the antagonists are more interesting, and the stakes are clearer. The first region is still kinda meh, maybe even worse than before, and there's a ton of endmin glazing going on. But hey, the second region at least got me a little curious about where things are headed next. One thing people don't talk about enough is optimization. My PC is pretty ancient and barely clears the minimum specs. But the jump in performance from CBT1 to CBT2 blew me away. I have no clue what kind of wizardry the dev team pulled, but I went from lagging like crazy in open areas to running smoothly almost everywhere, except in the most effect-heavy scenes. If you're on low-end hardware like me, you can breathe easy. Enfield looks gorgeous, and somehow it actually runs. That said, I chose my words carefully when I said the game improved in almost every department, because there's one thing that very clearly took a turn for the worse between CBT1 and CBT2. And yes, you already know where this is going. Monetization. And oh boy, when we get to the gacha, I've got a lot to get off my chest. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'll be following the same structure as my previous video. The only exception is the story section, which I might save for a separate video. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's jump into this CBT2 review and see what's changed. Alright, let's break down the big changes to the combat system. First up, the one everyone has been talking about, dodge. Dodge no longer resets your basic attack chain, which means landing final strikes is way easier now. Of course, the trade-off is that dodge attacks are gone. On top of that, the dodge window is way more forgiving. Even someone with terrible reaction speed like yours truly can now manage to dodge some hits. All of this adds up to much smoother combat, especially for melee operators. They don't feel awkward or punished anymore just for existing in close range. Perfect dodges also give you SP now. Combine that with how much easier it is to hit final strikes, and the SP economy isn't quite as suffocating as it used to be. That said, don't get any wild ideas, spamming skills is still not a thing. Skill points are still tight, and you really need to watch what you are doing if you don't want to waste them. Personally, I'm totally fine with that. Now, the flip side. Harder content was clearly tuned around this new dodge. High damage enemies will happily send you to the Shadow Realm in 2 or 3 hits if you are careless. In my experience, you pretty much need to dodge well and bring strong healing to survive. So, what else changed besides dodge? Physical statuses got a lighter rework. Skills that inflict physical statuses still make enemies vulnerable, and you can still only trigger a physical status on a vulnerable target. But now vulnerable can stack up to 4 times, and only some statuses consume those stacks. For example, just like in CBT1, Chen can inflict lift. Lift doesn't consume stacks. The first time you lift someone, they just get 1 vulnerable stack. From the second lift onward, the enemy gets lifted and gains another vulnerable stack. This is huge for Chen, because once you get going, you can keep lifting enemies with every skill cast, instead of having to reapply vulnerable from scratch. It gives her some very solid crowd control value. Then you have physical statuses that do consume stacks. And Min's Crush works like this. If the enemy has no stacks, Crush just adds 1. If they do have stacks, Crush burns them for physical damage. The more stacks consumed, the bigger the hit. Another stack consuming status is Breach, which is new. Breach makes the enemy take more physical damage for a duration, and higher stacks increase both the effect and the duration. Arts got the stack treatment too. Arts inflictions of the same type stack up to 4 times, and every time you hit 2 of the same type in a row, you trigger an Arts burst. If you hit an enemy with a different type instead, all stacks get consumed, and the Arts reaction that follows scales with the number of stacks you burned. Arts bursts and reactions themselves haven't changed from CBT1. The only thing that's been adjusted or clarified is corrosion. It lowers elemental resistance, not defense. The wording makes it sound like it should only affect arts damage, but from the little testing I did, it definitely boosted physical damage too. Another small clarification. Ultimate energy. Combo skills generate energy only for the operator who uses them, while battle skills generate energy for the whole team. Not sure if this was already true in CBT1, but at least now it's explicitly stated. Last thing I want to touch on, debuffs. Enemies can now inflict arts reaction statuses like combustion and solidification on you. To balance that out, some operators can now dispel those debuffs. I didn't personally run into enemies that inflict corrosion, but according to the in-game wiki, corrosion reduces movement speed and straight up disables dashing. So hey, if you hated dodge, there's at least something in here for you. There were a bunch of other small tweaks here and there in CBT2, but I won't bore you with every tiny detail. So I wrap this section up by saying this. Overall, these changes are a big win for me. The new stack mechanic adds even more depth to a combat system that I already thought was solid in CBT1. And the less punishing dodge finally makes a mechanic that felt rushed and awkward in CBT1 actually feel like it belongs. Alright, let's talk about gear. Gear was honestly one of the highlights for me back in CBT1, mainly because it ditched the usual RNG hell you see in most gacha games. I've had awful experiences with that kind of grind in games like Genshin and Star Rail, where you can spend literal months farming gear before a character even feels playable. And don't get me started on inventory management, constantly hoarding junk because maybe some future character might need it. Truly a terrible experience. So Enfield's RNG-free approach in CBT1 was a breath of fresh air. I could just craft the pieces I wanted and be done with it. No rummaging through trash, no endless farming. That said, a lot of players were worried there wasn't enough grind to keep people invested long term. And in CBT2, Hyperglyph's answer to that was gear artificing, which is basically gear upgrading with some RNG mixed in. In the gear artificing menu, you feed other gear pieces into the one you want to upgrade. Each attempt consumes one piece of gear and a very pricey and time-gated resource called Artificing Catalyst. You get those using stock bills, which you earn from various activities. We'll get into that later. For now, just know this, artificing catalysts are expensive and limited. So, you go for an upgrade and boom, it fails. Because yes, upgrades are RNG based. You can improve your odds by using gear that has higher stats than the piece you're upgrading, but at the end of the day, it's still a dice roll. The good news is that the upgrades themselves are fixed stats, so you don't have to chase insane high rolls. All in all, this system definitely stretches out the time it takes to fully max a character, which was exactly what people were asking for. Another notable change is with weapon essences. In CBT1, gold essences mostly came from a weekly game mode and weren't farmable at all. In CBT2, you can farm them in the energy alluvium mode by spending stamina. On top of that, you can use stock bales to buy engraving permits, which let you narrow down the bonuses on the essences you drop. Basically, less RNG pain, more targeting what you actually want. These permits are also expensive and time-gated, but they make essence farming way less miserable. And I'm not exaggerating here. Thanks to those permits, I got a perfect essence for Surtur's weapon in just a couple of runs. During CBT1, I don't think I ever saw a single perfect gold essence. That alone should tell you how big of a difference this is. Gold essences can also be upgraded now, or etched. You feed other gold essences into them to boost their bonus levels. Once again, the upgrade is RNG based and can fail, but failed attempts give you a special resource you can eventually spend to guarantee a success. It's another time sink, but at least there's a pity. Now, I'll be real with you. I'm not a fan of heavily RNG driven progression systems. Burning through an entire day's worth of resources just because the dice hated you doesn't feel great. And when those resources are as expensive and time-gated as artificing catalysts and engraving permits, failed attempts leave a very bad taste in your mouth. That said, there is a silver lining. Both the gear and essence systems still give you a sense of steady progress. You start with gear and often essences that are already usable out of the gate, and every successful upgrade makes your character a bit stronger. That's a completely different feeling from the endless gear chase in Hoyo games, where progression is binary. Either you hit the jackpot by upgrading the right stats, or you get absolutely nothing and you need to start over. Alright, let's move on to teams and characters. First off, CBT2 introduced two new classes. The first one is Striker. The game describes strikers as operators that exploit physical or arts effects applied by others to unleash big, decisive hits. In other words, high-ceiling damage dealers that really shine when enabled by the rest of the team. Then we've got Vanguards, whose whole thing is generating SP for the team. Great news if you're the kind of player who likes pushing buttons. That said, don't expect anything game-breaking. SP is still precious, and wasting it is still very much a bad idea. Now on to characters. The biggest and most pleasant surprise for me was Surtur, or Leviathan as she's called here. In CBT1, I honestly found her pretty underwhelming. Her damage was middling and her survivability was questionable at best, which was extra ironic, considering that in Arknights, Surtur is famously unkillable for 8 whole seconds. Well, CBT2 fixed that. Surtur got a full-on rework. She now has a talent that gives her 90% damage reduction for 8 seconds when she drops below 40% HP. Plus, she regenerates 5% HP per second during that window. In other words, she's basically mortal for 8 seconds again, just like the good old days. Her kit is fairly complex though. As a striker, Surtur really wants a team that can spam AoE hit infliction along with some corrosion or combustion. Operators like Akekuri, Wolfgat and Ardelia are fantastic partners here. All these arts effects feed Surtur's stacks, which translate into faster ultimate rotations, more damage and even some hit Resignor. That last bit is especially important. Resignor is a signature Surtur trait back in Arknights and one of the main reasons she's still a relevant DPS years later. Though seeing it here gives me hope that Leviathan won't get power crept immediately, which is always a real concern for damage dealers. CBT2 also leaned much harder into swarm and multi-enemy encounters compared to CBT1, and Surtur absolutely thrives in that environment. Her AoE cleanup is nasty. I'll be honest, she basically hard carried me through most of the difficult content CBT2 had to offer. So, is everything perfect with Surtur? Not quite. This is where we need to talk about something that doesn't get enough attention. Dupes. The common talking point is that dupes don't really matter and are just small stat bumps. That's unfortunately not true, and Surtur is a pretty glaring example. Her first dupe makes her battle skill recover 20 SP when it hits an enemy. That's an entirely new effect, not a numbers tweak. 20 SP might not sound insane, but remember that combo triggers exist. Back in CBT1, for example, Arknights combo skill triggered whenever a skill restored SP. Arknight got reworked in CBT2, sure, but the point still stands. At some point, there will be operators that synergize with SP recovery, and when that happens, whether you have Surtur's dupes or not could decide if she fits into your team at all. That's not a trivial dupe, not even close. The other operator I want to touch on is good old Aya, here known as Ardelia. She was given out for free during CBT2, weapon included, just like Angelina was free in CBT1. Ardelia is a supporter who brings healing, powerful damage amplifying debuffs and some damage on top. She works in both physical and art teams thanks to an easy universal combo trigger and debuffs that benefit everyone. That kind of flexibility is huge, because her heals and debuffs are so valuable that you'll want her regardless of who your main DPS is. The healing in particular is great since it's tied to a battle skill, meaning you can spam it when things get dicey. When you activate it, she spawns this fluffy pink sheep, and every time your controlled character walks over one, they get healed. Ardelia's dupes also matter more than you might expect. Her first dupe increases her physical and darts damage buff by 10%. At max level, her battle skill boosts damage by 25%, so that's a 40% jump in value. That's not negligible in my book. You could still argue that's just numbers, but her second dupe goes further. Her heals now affect an additional ally. That's no longer a numbers tweak, that's an entirely new feature. Unfortunately, CBT2 was pretty stingy with resources, so I couldn't build a wide roster. What I can say is that I cleared the entire main story using Enmin, Chen, Perlica and Ardelia, all 3 operators, and honestly, that team felt good and fun to play. As for the new 4-star Team Z7 characters, I spent a lot of time using Akekuri alongside Surtur, and she absolutely pulls her weight. She's easy to slot into most teams thanks to her simple combo trigger and strong SP recovery. Plus, her battle skill provides AoE hit infliction, which is amazing for any arts-focused lineup. From what I saw, the rest of Team Z7 follows the same design philosophy. Straightforward, solid kits that plug neatly into a variety of teams. That's great news for long-term team building, especially for players who just pulled a new 6-star and need accessible, reliable operators to support them. Alright, let's talk about the factory system. It's pretty much the same as it was in CBT1, which honestly tells you the system was already in a solid, well-polished state. The biggest new addition is something that was already teased in the CBT1 surveys: blueprints. Blueprints are basically preset layouts you can use to build full pipelines instantly. The tutorials even hand you a bunch of system-made blueprints for all the common products you'll need. You can also make your own, and of course, you can copy other players' blueprints by using simple shareable codes. Apparently, sharing blueprints goes through some kind of approval process. I say apparently because mine still weren't approved after a week. and I promise I didn't draw anything inappropriate in them. Blueprints have been a hot topic in the community, because some players think they'll cause people to just copy the perfect factory layouts and never touch the system again. And if players don't engage with the factory, Hyperglyph might eventually shift development resources away from it. It's a valid concern, but honestly, this goes back to the original scene of trying to combine widely different types of games into a single title. If Endfield were a pure factory automation game, Blueprints wouldn't be a problem at all. Plenty of factory games use them, in fact. People who play those games want to build pipelines and won't use the blueprints to sidestep the factory gameplay entirely. But Endfield isn't just that. Many players will join purely for the combat, and for them, the factory will feel like yet another mandatory side system, basically Arknights base 2.0. These players are gonna do the tutorials because the game forces them to, then immediately look for the fastest way to ignore the system forever. Blueprints or not, they would still hop online and copy layouts from wherever they can find them. Without blueprints, they'd spend a little more time fiddling with the system, sure, but not much. And then they'd go straight to surveys and social media to complain about a system they already hated. Blueprints just keep those players happy, or at least quiet, and let them focus on what they actually enjoy. And honestly, I don't blame those players. People have only so much free time. They shouldn't be forced to engage with a whole separate genre just to keep up with the content they do like. That's why, to me, mixing these two game modes was the original sin in the first place. While we are on topic, let's talk about how important the factory actually was in CBT2. Back in CBT1, the factory mainly produced gear and tacticals, and you could stockpile those materials in just a couple of days. You could also complete outpost orders to earn materials to upgrade characters. But those same materials could be farmed using stamina, so the factory wasn't really essential. In CBT2, things are a little different. You still craft gear and tacticals, and outpost orders still let you buy upgrade mats. The big difference is that the currency from those orders can now also be used to buy artificing catalysts and engraving permits, which are crucial endgame progression items, as we already covered when talking about gear and weapons. So, is the factory more important now? Yes and no. The answer is a bit nuanced. You see, completing outpost orders is no longer the only way to earn the currency you need for catalysts and permits. You've got alternatives now. One is the stock market system, where you buy discounted items from your own market, then sell them at a profit in a friend's market where demand is higher. Buy low, sell high, basically. Another option is a delivery minigame where you have to travel from point A to point B under certain restrictions, like no jumping or taking 0 hits. It's basically Death Stranding. So yes, optimizing the factory earns you more valuable stuff than before, but you are not forced to go all in on it if you don't want to. Catalysts and permits are also time gated, so you probably won't need to max out your entire factory just to afford them anyway. Now, speaking of factory adjacent systems, let's touch on the tower defense mode. Clearing stages in this mode increases the payout you get when completing outpost orders, so the two are loosely linked. I was really critical of this mode back in CBT1, and while I still wouldn't call it a standout feature, I will say the devs made visible improvements. Enemies now have more interesting mechanics that force you to think instead of just dropping all your turrets in a single spot. For example, you've got these massive beasts that buff speed and defense for all enemies around them, so you need to blast them the moment they step out of the red boxes or you'll get swarmed. Another enemy dashes forward when it takes its first hit, so you need to space out your turrets or he'll slip right past you and hit your blue box. These are small touches, but they add some layer of challenge, and I appreciate the direction. A last thing I want to cover: shared facilities. Some structures placed by other players, like ziplines and combat towers, can show up in your world, and you can use them like your own. They slowly expire, but you can upvote them to extend their lifespan. The funniest shared facility though is the beacon memo. They are basically little messages left by other players. They use a set list of preset words, so you won't get anything too creative. But you will get gems telling you to jump off a cliff, which a big part of the community loves to drop next to ledges or bridges. Some beacons are genuinely helpful, however. They'll point out hidden entrances and puzzle hints or warn you about strong enemies. But the funny ones are priceless. And for some unfathomable reason, these beacons also appear in cutscenes. Seeing jump cliff cheers pop up in the middle of a dramatic emotional moment is something truly special. Alright, let's run through the dailies in Endfield. Back in CBT1, you had that one daily quest you could knock out in a couple of minutes to grab all your daily rewards. And in CBT2, that part hasn't changed one bit. So technically, your dailies still boil down to a tiny puzzle or a quick resource hunt on the map, and you're done. Then comes the usual housekeeping on the Djang, picking up whatever your operators cooked up in the cabins, grabbing the plants they grew, and handing out gifts to increase trust with them. On top of that, you now have to sell items on the market, and that actually matters, because it's a core source of stock bills for buying artificing catalysts and engraving permits. Outpost orders are also part of the routine, but those are literally a couple of clicks and you're out. Next up is the Death Stranding delivery minigame I mentioned earlier. These can actually take a fair amount of time, but you can speed things up a lot by setting up zipline routes for common delivery points. You can also transfer deliveries to other players. If they complete the delivery for you, both of you get the rewards. Each player can do up to 3 deliveries for others, so that's another thing you might want to add to your daily routine. After that, you've got the credit store, which works almost exactly like the one in Arknights. This store refreshes daily. Each day, you earn credits based on how many friends sell items at your market, and you can also get some by visiting friends' spaceships and boosting their production. This shop usually sells character upgrade materials, but sometimes it also has pool currency for both characters and weapons. So yeah, never skip it. Then there's stamina. It regenerates 1 point every 7 minutes and caps at 360. That's about 42 hours for a full charge. Most farming stages cost 80 stamina, which means you are looking at 2 or 3 runs a day. Each run is roughly 2 minutes, at least for me, and you do get a few double stamina tickets, just not many. Once stamina is burned and the Djang chores are wrapped up, I'd say the bulk of your dailies is basically done. If you transfer your deliveries and avoid taking others' deliveries, the whole thing sits at around 15 minutes for me. Even less if I skip giving gifts. You might still need to pick up flowers or rocks for your characters, but realistically, that only matters when leveling a new operator. By the way, Hypergriff put some real love into letting you customize your Djang. You can show off medals, put your favorite operators on display, and even show off your coolest weapons. There's also a projector spot for wallpapers unlocked from character dupes. Some of them go way harder than they need to. Zai's and the Lash's were absolute bangers. Alright, so that's the daily routine. What about the endgame? The awful weekly roguelike from CBT1 is thankfully dead and buried. In its place, CBT2 introduced something closer to an extraction-style game mode. The goal here is to rack up points within a time limit by collecting items. Certain actions, like fighting enemies or opening chests, consume more time. Once the timer runs out, you are forcibly extracted and your score is tallied. The stage has multiple routes that you need to discover and unlock through puzzles, so it's not a complete snooze fest. That said, this mode is permanent and has one-time rewards, no weekly resets. The rewards are mostly gacha currency and standard banner tickets. Am I impressed? Not really. It wasn't particularly challenging either, but since it's a one and done deal, I guess I can live with it. I do hope Hyperglyph eventually adds something closer to integrated strategies, because the game desperately needs a proper endgame mode. Hopefully, the devs are still cooking. Next, Umbral Monument, another permanent set of challenges in CBT2. 3 stages, each with their own mechanics and gimmicks, plus some familiar faces if you're an Arknights veteran. Each stage has 2 modes, normal and challenge, same idea as Arknights. This was probably the most demanding content in the test, needing solid operators and some strong healing to push through the challenge versions. You've probably noticed the timer hovering over the stages. Yep, you are forced to clear within that time. Timers also show up in other content, like farming stages, and the community was not happy about that. Timers are the cheapest way to make content harder without actually designing good encounters. Sure, Arknights has a few timers here and there too, but they're exceptions, not the rule. That's why Arknights feels rewarding. It values smart play, not just raw damage checks. That said, it's still too early to say Enfield is going full Hoyo mode, with aggressive timers designed to push meta comps and drive spending. There are 3 reasons for that. First, the 10-minute timer in Umbral Monument is pretty generous. I cleared the challenge stages at a relaxed pace, even while underleveled. Second, Hoyo games usually have multiple reward tiers tied to different timers, so even casual players get something. Enfield doesn't do that. You either clear and get all the rewards, or you fail and get nothing. With that setup, the timer can't be too punishing, or at least it shouldn't be. Third, Umbral Monument is permanent. If your roster isn't ready now, you can always come back later when your team is stronger. Still, timers can become a problem, and if players don't like this direction, now is the time to speak up. Stages should test knowledge and execution, not just slap on a stopwatch and call it difficulty. We want actual good stage design here. Finally, CBT2 also gave us a tiny preview of the first event. It was a simple photo-taking minigame, nothing to write home about. But it dropped materials needed for raising skill masteries, which were otherwise insanely rare. And hey, maybe it's just me, but these mats look suspiciously like crowns. I wonder which other gacha game uses event-locked crowns to level up skills. Alright, we've finally made it to the dreaded section. Before diving into the gacha nightmare, let's take a quick detour and talk about the battle pass that got introduced in CBT2. It's split into 3 tiers. The first one is free for everyone. The second tier you buy with in-game currency that pays itself back as you level it, and the third one is a premium tier that costs $10. The rewards are the usual mix. Character upgrade mats, some pulls, stamina refills, nothing out of the ordinary. You also get double stamina tickets for farming, and the second and third tiers throw in 6-star weapon selectors from a small pool, plus crowns for skill mastery. Crowns are definitely going to be rare on release, so that's important. The premium tier also hands out currency for the weapon banner, and trust me, that's going to matter a lot in a minute. Up to this point, things look fine. The paid pass has useful stuff, but nothing that breaks the game. The real monetization stink starts right after this. The biggest change compared to CBT1 is that we now have both a limited banner and a standard banner. And yes, it works exactly like the usual Hoyo formula. Limited characters do not get added to the standard pool once their banner ends. There is one small twist though. Limited operators can appear as off-rate pulls in the next two limited banners after their own. So if you lose the 50-50, there's a chance you will at least get another limited operator. Ideally, one that's still somewhat meta-relevant. It's a tiny consolation prize, assuming you don't just pull your 5th copy of some random standard 6-star. But even with that, you are still forced to keep pulling, because the 120 pull rate up guarantee does not carry over. If you stop before hitting it, you've basically thrown your pulls into the void. Forget about building PT in Enfield, that concept simply does not exist. There's also a mechanic where every 240 pulls on a limited banner gives you a dupe token for the rate up character. This can be useful for operators with impactful dupes like Sorter, but let's be real, this is whale bait, and whales don't exactly pinch pennies. Now, here's where things get really baffling. After the first 60 pulls on a limited banner, you get a 10 pull ticket for the next limited banner. And I genuinely have to ask, what on earth was Hypergive thinking here? Why would I care about a 10 pull on a banner I might not even want, especially when accumulated rate up PT does not carry over? Sure, those pulls still count toward the 80 pull 6-star PT, which does carry over, but come on, it still feels like a slap in the face. At the very least, let me choose which limited banner I want to use the ticket on, instead of forcing it into whatever comes next. As for the standard banner, there's not much to say. Same rates as the limited banner, but no rate ups and no free dupe tokens. Unsurprisingly, most of the tickets you get from quests and challenges are for this banner. The one piece of good news is that standard operators don't seem completely useless like in some other games. Oh, and after 300 pulls, you can pick a standard 6-star. Once. I wonder where Hypergive got the inspiration for that mechanic, because it sounds very familiar. Now, since basically every new character is limited, there's an obvious consequence. You can't buy them from the certificate shop anymore. That's the shop where you spend currency earned from 5-star and 6-star dupes. The only thing you can buy now is a rotating 5-star. In CBT1, I was able to straight up buy a 6-star operator leaving from the cert shop, and that felt amazing. Being able to buy operators from the cert shop is one of the biggest reasons Arknights is so F2P friendly, and I was genuinely happy to see Enfield following that tradition. Well, not anymore. And since the 300 pull selector on the standard banner is a one-time thing, there's nothing to replace it. That's just sad. The other massive change in CBT2 is how arsenal tickets work. These are used for the weapon banner. Now you can only get them by pulling on character banners, with a tiny amount coming from the paid battle pass and the credit store. In CBT1, there was a weekly mode that gave out tons of arsenal tickets, and fine, maybe something like that will come back at launch, but in CBT1 you could also directly convert gacha currency into arsenal tickets. That option is completely gone, and that is by far the worst change. Let me give you a real example. I pulled Sorter by winning the first 50-50 on her banner. Great, right? Except that meant I hadn't pulled enough characters to earn the arsenal tickets needed to guarantee her weapon. Of course, I didn't get the weapon early. After 70 pulls on the weapon banner, I was completely out of arsenal tickets. I needed just one more 10 pull to guarantee Sorter's weapon, and I physically couldn't pull anymore. And since weapon banners are time limited, I couldn't just wait and slowly accumulate tickets. So I was forced into a soul-crushing choice. Either keep pulling on Sorter's banner, fully aware that those pulls would be wasted because of the no carryover system, or pull on the standard banner. I ended up pulling on the standard banner, just to inch closer to the 300 pull selector. And let me tell you, that felt awful. Genuinely one of the worst gacha experiences I've ever had. Now, to be fair, the average number of pulls needed to get a rate up character and their weapon should still be the same as in CBT1. and that was competitive with other gacha games. The real problem is the number of free pulls. CBT2 seems stingy compared to competitors at launch. Based on various Reddit breakdowns, we are looking at roughly 140 pulls, plus some limited and standard tickets, with limited tickets being around 15 to 30. For comparison, Star Rail launched with over 210 pulls. Wuthering Waves and ZZZ both gave over 250 pulls. Enfield appears to be giving fewer limited pulls while also running 3 limited banners instead of 2. That's not a great look. We'll have to see the final numbers at launch, but yeah, at this point I think you see the problem. Back in CBT1, I was willing to overlook the ways Enfield's gacha was worse than the standard Hoyo system. Things like no guaranteed rate up after losing a 50-50 and no rate up PT carryover. I was okay with that because there were strong positives balancing it out. No limited only operators, a meaningful cert shop, and a very generous weapon banner. Now, those positives are mostly gone, and what's left doesn't make up for the negatives. The few improvements either only matter to whales, and I'm not one, or make no sense at all, like the forced 10 pull on the next limited banner. On top of that, the whole system is so overcomplicated that most players will just feel confused. And it's hard not to think that this complexity exists purely to hide how bad the deal actually is. If Hypergraph wants to copy the Hoyo formula and abandon Arknights gacha philosophy, fine, do it. But don't give us this worst of both worlds mess. If you're going to copy Hoyo, copy everything. Give us proper 50-50 guarantees. Give us PT carryover. Commit to it and stop trying to have it both ways. Time to wrap things up. Looking at the jump from CBT1 to CBT2, Enfield has clearly improved in a lot of meaningful ways. Combat is deeper and smoother thanks to the new stack mechanics and the reworked dodge system, which finally gives melee operators the spotlight they deserved. Gear and weapons now have proper progression systems, offering long-term goals instead of being one and done. Surtur's redesign is a massive win. It fixes all of the issues she had in CBT1 and turns her into a genuinely strong and satisfying DPS option. Blueprints help take some of the pressure off the factory for players who are more interested in story or combat. On top of that, CBT2 introduced new permanent modes, the extraction minigame and challenge mode stages, giving us the first real hint of what Enfield's endgame could look like. Even though I didn't talk about the story in this video, I can say that there were noticeable improvements there as well. Enfield also continues to excel in presentation. The cutscenes were already a highlight in CBT1 and they've only gotten better. Visually, the game is stunning, especially in the Wuling region, and the soundtrack is phenomenal, ranging from soft, emotional background tracks to high-intensity tension-building combat themes.
Just imagine yourself as a kite, and feel the ephemeral link between your body and the land. And that is the trick of flying.
Unfortunately, all of these strengths are weighed down by what the monetization has turned into. From dupes that actually matter, to every new character being limited, to the removal of 6-star operators from the cert shop. And that's before even getting into the weapon banner ticket situation. It's hard to ignore how aggressively player unfriendly this all feels. What makes this especially frustrating is that you can clearly see the effort the developers put into making Endfield more fun, more polished and more accessible, only for those gains to be undermined by questionable business decisions. And it's not even clear what the strategy is here. Competing with established market leaders using systems that feel worse in key areas and that are guaranteed to spark controversy just doesn't make much sense to me. In the end, this feels like a story we've seen far too many times. A genuinely good game being dragged down by the excesses of gacha greed. Much like the blight in Enfield's own narrative, it's something that corrupts, spreads and consumes everything it touches. It's hard not to feel disappointed. I fear that if the factory doesn't scare players away, the gacha system very well might. We'll have to see how things shake out and whether any of these monetization decisions get rolled back. The official release is set for the 22nd of January, so we won't have to wait much longer to see what the final version of Endfield really looks like. And with that, this review update comes to an end. Thanks so much for watching. Really, I appreciate it a lot.